You're not going to believe how much the NFC landscape changed in just a matter of hours. One move just sent a shockwave across the entire conference, and if you're a Vikings fan, this is the kind of news that instantly grabs your attention. What looked like a tough road to the playoffs suddenly got even tougher, and there's one team that may have just separated itself from the rest of the pack. The crazy part? This move doesn't just affect one franchise. It changes potential playoff matchups, shifts expectations for the entire conference, and could force teams like Minnesota to rethink how close they really are to competing for a Super Bowl. The Vikings have been building something exciting, but after what just happened, fans are asking the same question. Did the gap between the Vikings and the NFC's top contenders just get bigger? Stick around, because there's a lot to unpack, and the implications of this move could be felt all season long. Before we jump in, make sure to hit that like button if you're a die-hard Vikings fan, and drop a SKOL in the comments so we know who's riding with the purple all season long. The moment this news broke, it instantly changed the way Minnesota Vikings fans have to look at the NFC landscape heading into the 2026 season. What seemed like a competitive conference only hours earlier suddenly feels far more complicated. And the reason is simple. The Los Angeles Rams landed one of the most dominant defensive players of this generation. According to the information discussed in the report, the Cleveland Browns finalized a blockbuster deal that sends Myles Garrett to Los Angeles in exchange for Jared Verse, a 2027 first-round pick, a 2028 second-round pick, and a 2029 third-round pick. And that is where the story becomes especially important for Vikings fans. For months, conversations around the NFC focused on several contenders. Teams like the Seahawks, Eagles, Packers, Lions, and Rams were all viewed as legitimate threats. But this move may have created a clear favorite. The Rams did not simply add another starter. They added a player who has consistently been one of the most feared pass rushers in football, and who is coming off a season in which he recorded 23 sacks in 17 games, according to the report. Think about what that means. Defensive coordinators spend entire weeks designing plans to slow down elite pass rushers. Offensive lines dedicate extra blockers. Quarterbacks speed up their internal clocks. Yet Garrett continues to produce at an elite level year after year. The report highlights that before last season's incredible production, he had already posted multiple consecutive seasons with at least 14 sacks, demonstrating remarkable consistency. From Cleveland's perspective, there is logic behind the trade. Losing a player of Garrett's caliber is never ideal, but acquiring a young edge rusher like Jared Verse, along with significant draft capital, gives the Browns an opportunity to reset and build for the future. The package is substantial, and it provides flexibility if they need to continue reshaping their roster in the years ahead. But from the Rams' perspective, this is the kind of move that signals one thing and one thing only. They believe their championship window is open right now. That is what should grab the attention of every Vikings fan. The Rams were already a dangerous football team. They already possessed offensive weapons, veteran leadership, and one of the league's most respected head coaches. Now they have added arguably the most disruptive defensive force available anywhere in football. The impact is already being reflected in expectations across the league. According to the report, betting markets reacted immediately, pushing the Rams to the top of the NFC odds board. Their conference championship odds surged, while other contenders remained behind them. Even more striking, they reportedly moved to the top position among Super Bowl favorites as well. For Minnesota, this creates an uncomfortable reality. The Vikings are still viewed as a competitive team. They remain capable of fighting for a playoff spot and potentially winning postseason games. But when evaluating the path through the NFC, the challenge has become significantly steeper. A potential playoff matchup against a Rams team featuring Myles Garrett suddenly looks like one of the toughest assignments any NFC team could face. Imagine a postseason game in Los Angeles, a loud stadium, a high-pressure environment, an offense led by experienced playmakers, and then, every passing down, Garrett attacking the quarterback, while the rest of the Rams' defense benefits from the extra attention he commands. That is why this move feels so significant. The report also notes that the Rams have built a reputation for aggressively pursuing star talent, often sacrificing future draft resources to strengthen their roster immediately. Once again, they followed that philosophy. Rather than protecting picks years down the road, they chose proven elite talent in the present. Whether fans agree with that strategy or not, it is difficult to argue with the results. Los Angeles has consistently remained relevant by making bold decisions, and this latest move may be one of the boldest yet. For Vikings supporters, the biggest question now is simple. Has the gap between Minnesota and the NFC's elite teams become even larger? Or can the Vikings still close that distance during the remainder of the offseason? What is your reaction to the Myles Garrett trade, and do you believe the Rams are now the team to beat in the NFC? Let me know in the comments. While the Myles Garrett news dominated the headlines, there was another development hidden inside the report that Vikings fans should not ignore. Minnesota's financial situation appears to be stronger than many expected, and that could create opportunities before the season begins. According to the information provided, the Vikings currently have roughly $13 million in available salary cap space, a figure that gives the organization flexibility as training camp approaches. And that flexibility matters. Championship-caliber teams are always looking for ways to improve around the margins. Injuries happen. Unexpected roster weaknesses emerge. Veterans become available. Having cap space available allows a front office to react when those opportunities appear. The report specifically points out that many teams prefer to maintain between $10 million and $15 million in available cap room throughout the season. That financial cushion can be used for trade deadline additions, emergency signings, or strategic roster upgrades that may become necessary as the season unfolds. Minnesota currently sits right in that range. So the natural question becomes, if the Vikings decide to use some of that financial flexibility, who could realistically help this roster? One of the first names mentioned is Jadeveon Clowney. Now, Clowney is no longer the player who entered the league carrying enormous expectations as a former top overall draft pick. But what makes him interesting at this stage of his career is his ability to still impact passing situations. According to the report, he recorded 8.5 sacks last season, while also contributing tackles for loss and quarterback hits, despite playing on a struggling defense. The appeal is obvious. Minnesota already has young talent developing on the edge. What Clowney could potentially provide is another situational pass-rushing threat. He would not be expected to carry the defense, but on critical third downs, his experience and ability to pressure quarterbacks could still prove valuable. Then there is a name that might excite Vikings fans even more: Cam Jordan. The connection is already there. His father, Steve Jordan, remains one of the most respected figures in franchise history and is a member of the Vikings Hall of Fame. But beyond the family ties, Cam Jordan's production remains impressive. According to the report, he finished the 2025 season with 10.5 sacks and 15 tackles for loss, showing that he continues to be effective despite being in the later stages of his career. What makes Jordan particularly intriguing is that he offers more than pass-rushing production. Veteran leadership is one of the most underrated assets in professional football. Young players often credit experienced veterans for helping them understand preparation, film study, and the mental side of the game. For a developing player like Dallas Turner, Having someone with Jordan's resume inside the locker room could be incredibly valuable. And speaking of mentorship, another fascinating possibility mentioned in the report is Von Miller. Few edge rushers have built a career as accomplished as Miller's. While he is no longer in his physical prime, the report notes that he still managed a productive season and remains capable of contributing as a situational pass rusher. More importantly, Dallas Turner's professional comparison coming out of college was often linked to Miller. Bringing in a future Hall of Famer who can still contribute on the field while mentoring one of the franchise's young defensive building blocks could be an attractive option. Another name highlighted is Kyle Van Noy, and his appeal comes from familiarity. Brian Flores already knows exactly what Van Noy brings to a defense. According to the report, Van Noy continued producing at a high level recently, recording double-digit sacks while demonstrating the versatility to rush the passer, defend the run, and contribute in coverage situations. That versatility is something Flores values tremendously. Defenders who can move around the formation create confusion for offenses. They make disguises more effective. They give defensive coordinators flexibility. Van Noy already understands many of the concepts Flores likes to employ, which could make any potential transition remarkably smooth. The final veteran discussed in the report is Bobby Wagner. Even after all these years, Wagner continues filling up the stat sheet. The report references a season with 162 tackles, along with sacks and consistent production against both the run and pass. But perhaps his greatest value would not appear on a stat sheet at all. The Vikings are entering a period of transition in leadership. The report specifically references the loss of Harrison Smith's presence. Players like Wagner bring credibility the moment they enter a locker room. Younger players listen because they have seen everything the league can throw at them. They understand how to prepare, how to practice, and how to maintain consistency over an entire season. When looking at all these possibilities together, an interesting picture emerges. Minnesota may not make the blockbuster move that dominates national headlines the way the Rams did with Myles Garrett. But successful teams are not built exclusively through splashy acquisitions. Sometimes the difference between winning and losing in January comes from adding the right veteran at the right time. The Vikings appear to have the financial flexibility to make that kind of move if they choose. Whether it is Cam Jordan's leadership, Von Miller's mentorship, Kyle Van Noy's familiarity with Brian Flores, Jadeveon Clowney's pass-rushing ability, or Bobby Wagner's experience, each option would bring something different to the roster. Meanwhile, the reality remains that the NFC has become even more competitive after the Rams' blockbuster acquisition. If Minnesota wants to close the gap, every roster decision from this point forward becomes even more important. Now I want to hear from you, Vikings fans. Which veteran free agent would you most like to see Minnesota sign? And do you think the Vikings need another major move to keep pace with the NFC's top contenders? Drop your thoughts below, smash that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown, and subscribe for more Vikings coverage as we continue tracking every major development surrounding the team. SKOL!